On today's show, we're going to be talking about passive income and ETFs, and of course, dividends. Who doesn't love a good talk about dividends? Welcome to Financial Brew. My name is Candace, and as always, I will be your guide as we take another trip into the financial verse. So, grab your brew, sit back, and let's start right now. Exchange-traded funds are often called simply ETFs, which is much easier to say for sure. So with ETFs, it's all about diversification. An ETF, of course, is made up of many different stocks all bundled together into a fund. Hence, the fund part of exchange-traded funds. They act as hedges against sector crashes. So what I mean by that is if one or two sectors, so let's say real estate and financials is down, well, if the other sectors are having great days, they can then sort of hedge against that. So your ETF doesn't really experience a red day because they're being propped up. The sectors that are down are being propped up, of course, by the sectors that are up. This is fantastic. Now, if the entire market is red, of course, your ETF will be in the red too, but those of us who've been in the investing game for a little while, we look at the red as a buy the dip day. So that can sometimes be a chance to get some of your favorite dividend paying stocks, or any stocks for that matter, at a discount. These things are of course managed because somebody has to put them together, and they also have to adjust them on the fly. Because if a company inside of an ETF is doing poorly for too long, then the manager of that ETF may want to remove that company and replace it with a better performing company. So that way there you can, of course, continue to reap the benefits of that ETF, which is fantastic. Now, because somebody has to do all that work, there's management fees. In the cases of an ETF, though, those management fees are really, really low. They're much lower than, say, for example, a mutual fund, which is not an ETF, by the way. We'll talk about mutual funds in another video, so if that's the type of thing you're interested in learning about, be sure to hit subscribe down below. These guys are also a very reliable source of blue chip dividends. Well, the dividend ones are. I mean, there are growth ETFs that don't provide dividends, but we're not going to be talking about those ones today. So before we actually get into the specific ETFs that we're going to talk about, I want to just hit on very quickly ETFs and taxes. Tax season is coming faster than most of us want. Oh, it's always a good idea to have in the back of your mind what's going on with your investments. So with an ETF, basically you're looking at capital gains tax. So 50% of the profits made from the sale. So that is if you bought it at $40 and you sold it at $50, then that $10 difference, half of that, so $5 would be taxable. But when it comes to the dividends, we have to differentiate between Canada and the US, or any other country, to be honest. So with Canadians, the dividends, we do have a dividend tax credit in our country, and that will mean that your dividends are not going to be taxed fully. Foreign dividends, though, we have Canada's Income Tax Act. So you can declare foreign tax credits that's based on the amount of withholding tax in any particular country. So that's kind of nice, but again, it's still kind of messy in my opinion. So for my Canadian ones, I just simply will use my TFSA because then I'm not worried about taxes of any sort because it's tax-free for Canadian ETFs. Now the foreign ETFs, particularly most of the time we're thinking about the US, they are not, well, they're tax-free, but you still pay on the dividends when you have it in a TFSA. So you're still getting that withholding tax. And the RRSP, that's where you want to put your foreign dividend payers because they're going to be tax-free right across the board. Now, the reason for that is that the US doesn't recognize the TFSA as a registered account. And the tax agreement between Canada and the USA, for example, it specifies that the withholding tax isn't applicable on the registered accounts. So will this change in the future? I don't know. I don't even know if anybody's thinking about changing it. So certainly your RRSP is the place to go. Now that we got all that preamble out of the way, let's get to some actual dividends. And we're going to start with Vanguard. Now, before we start talking about Vanguard, I do want to point out is that Wealthsimple has an opportunity for you to get some free stocks. If you have not used that yet, then what are you waiting for? Use my code up there. So 8_BZ or BZ-G. So 8_BZ-G. You'll get some free stocks. I'll get some free stocks. Pretty cool. I'm just going to leave that up there as we go through these stocks, because if anybody does need it, there's no need to pause. I'll just leave it there. So let's get back to Vanguard. So Vanguard Canadian High Dividend Yield Index ETF, its ticker is VDY. This is one of my favorite high dividend yield. It's a very, very stable stock. That's one of the reasons why I like it. It's very blue chip. They have a healthy dividend yield of 4.67%. They do have a management fee. It's 0.22%. Now what they do is they track the high dividend Canadian equities. They're mostly large cap. So 92.8% of the stocks within this ETF are high cap. They have a few medium cap and even less of the lower cap. So they're very, very stacked towards the high cap, and that's part of the whole stability of this stock. So they have sectors that include financial, energy, telecommunications, utilities, materials, industrials, I guess, and real estate. So definitely a great ETF, very stable, an incredible one to have in your portfolio for sure. Our next one is BMO Canadian Dividend ETF, ticker ZDV, or ZDV for our American friends. So this one here has a higher dividend than Vanguard, so it's a dividend yield of 5.29%, management fee of 0.38%. They have basically they have a yield-weighted portfolio of Canadian dividend-paying stocks. So you're looking at 95% of the stocks in here being Canadian. So if you think about that, though, if you have this, for example, in your TFSA, that 5% of foreign stocks, there may be some tax withholding on that. So keep that in mind. It's going to be so minuscule, like we're talking pennies. But, well, depending on how many, if you own like 100,000 of these, it's going to add up. But that's something just to be aware of. As if you do have a significant amount, then that may be something that you may want to look into the foreign tax credit. Unless, of course, you have it in your RRSP, then you're perfectly safe. This BMO Canadian Dividend ETF is a medium risk ETF. And the reason they're a medium risk is that they're prioritizing high dividends and growth potential. And that's over, of course, multiple sectors. So in addition to the dividends that you're getting out, they do want to look at actually giving you a little bit of a return too if you're looking to sell these ETFs somewhere down the line. And now, if you have them in your RRSP, of course, well, eventually you will. When you retire and your RRSP becomes a RIF, that's going to be, and that's something, we'll talk about that in another video. So that's your BMO Canadian Dividend ETF. We're going to see BMO again, folks, in just a couple minutes. But before we do that, we have the iShares Canadian Select Dividend Index ETF, ticker XDV. So with this one here, we've got a dividend yield of 3.97%, management fee of 0.55. Now this one is interesting because the investments within it are picked to mirror Dow Jones Select Index. So they are a low-risk ETF due to their healthy distribution across multiple sectors. So they are a really good, solid one that you don't have to worry so much about, which is kind of nice. It's nice to have some of your passive income being truly passive, meaning you don't have to worry about them at all. This one fits that completely. Now, BMO is back again. So this one's actually really interesting. It's the BMO Canada High Dividend Covered Call ETF, ticker ZWC. This one has a really high yield, dividend yield of 8.09%. Management fees a little bit higher, 0.72%. And you'll understand because there's a little more work in this one than the other ETFs that we've mentioned thus far. So what they do is they invest in high quality Canadian dividend stocks And they use covered call options to mitigate risks associated with taking long positions out on some of the stocks that are used by this ETF. So that's really, really cool. Now, when we're talking about call options and long positions, that does tend to be a little more risky. And that's kind of why they've got these balanced off. So if something goes horribly long with a long position is basically you're going to predict that the price of a certain stock is going to be much higher at a future date, and it's like almost taking a bet out on it. But then they've got they have that mitigated by the call options and some of the premiums that they receive from the call options. We will definitely talk about some of that in a future video. So these are, believe it or not, even with the riskiness that we just mentioned, this is still a medium risk stock. And that's because they have been so good at pulling this off. Full disclosure on this one, I do own some of these, and I can't recall ever having any issues. I've received my dividend as expected since I've had it. Now, mind you, this is why I always say, do your own research. These guys are having a fantastic year. So maybe in a year that's not so fantastic, the stock may not be as great, and I will reevaluate them when that happens. All right, next one up, we get the iShares S&P TSX Canadian Dividend Aristocrats Index ETF, ticker CDZ. This one I love because I have this. I just really love the Aristocrats. Basically they are blue chip. They're the definition of blue chip in many ways. Now this one here, the dividend yield is a little low at 3.15%, but it's just the safety of the stock makes me not care that it's low. The management fee, 0.60%. And keep in mind with these management fees, all of these fees like that, you don't even see it because that's removed before they even tell you the 3.15%. So your yield is not affected by that fee. That's already been taken out. So not something to really have to worry too much about. So these guys here, they've invested in high quality Canadian aristocrats. So these are, of course, stocks that have increased their dividends for 5 years or more. Now down below in my more info, I'm just going to add a couple links to a couple of videos I think that are relevant. So for example, my Canadian Aristocrats video. I'll also add a couple of the other dividend videos I've done as well. So like I said, really low risk. These are fantastic stocks. Fantastic safety. And they are awesome in your portfolio. Now before we finish, I do want to very quickly just point out I'm not a financial advisor. So these stocks were presented to you today, not as financial advice, but as education and entertainment, if you find me amusing. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to click on that like down below. If you want to support the channel, there's lots of opportunity in the affiliate links down below as well. I think that's going to wrap it up for this time, folks. Thank you once again for joining me in the Financial Verse. We'll be back soon with another video. Be sure Wednesday night to check out Crypto Night in Canada. We're going to have something fantastic this Wednesday night with a meet and greet, unlike anything you've probably ever seen before. So definitely head over to the Dancers channel. That's also down below. Click on that link, go over there, give them a subscribe, and come back for Crypto Night in Canada on Wednesday night. I can't wait. It will be fantastic. I'll have another video out on Thursday. Until then, you guys all take care. We'll see you again soon.